Today we'll be starting a new series where we recreate comic book covers in a more realistic style. Will it be better than the original? That's for you to decide. Let's get into it. Here's the cover we're doing today, but first let's bring down the opacity and start outlining the shape of Venom because I have absolutely zero drawing background. Once that is done, we will color it in with the base color and then start adding shadows, highlights, and midtones to shape the body of Venom. Now we're going to add various shades of blue according to the shadow, midtones, and highlights to give him his color. The lighting will be coming from the top right, so doing some small highlights now will guide me down the road when painting. For the blood, I started tracing the shape of the original blood from the cover, then used a color overlay layer to change it to a red, and then as usual started adding darker reds to make it look more like blood, and then some pinks and whites to give it that reflective look since it's a fluid. To save some time, I outlined Spidey off camera and gave him his base colors. I then changed the lenses to Andrew's Spider-Man 2 suit and started painting them in with white. And for the webbing, I used this reference to get it as accurate as possible. I started painting details on the lens with dark grays and whites to try and make them look kind of shiny and overall to give them more dimension. I then started shading the actual eye part of the lens so it looks like it's round rather than flat. I then started painting in the mask by using different shades of red for the shadows and highlights, and so far this is how the cover is turning out. I also used this lens texture on the lens to make it more realistic. I first lowered the opacity, desaturated it, and then just masked it in. For the logo, I used this PNG image, flipped it vertically, and started warping it into place. After that, I turned it black and erased the parts that weren't needed. Then to finish Spidey's base plate, I painted the remaining areas with their corresponding colors and added simple shading. Now for the green part on the comic book, to me it looks like it's shattered wood pieces or some type of material, but for the sake of time I'll be using the alien goo texture from my dragon egg art piece and use it as Venom's webs, which I think would make the cover look pretty sick. So I grabbed the slime texture from the artwork and dragged it into here, and I'll just start duplicating it, warping, and distorting each one to fill the entire green area of the comic book. For some added detail, I decided to add the symbiote onto Spidey's body to make it look similar to when Toby was getting the symbiote attached to him. I did this by creating the shape of the symbiote with a black brush first and tried to make it look as natural as possible. I then added some dark gray to create the midtones of the symbiote and finally added highlights to create that reflective look since the symbiote is kind of slimy looking. This part was very, I guess you can say, annoying because it was hard to make it look natural at times, so I had to constantly redo it. I also added the symbiote to his mask to give more of a dramatic effect. I then started adding more highlights to Spider-Man by painting them in, of course, with lighter reds and also white. To make the webbing more realistic in 3D, I duplicated the layer, used Gaussian blur to create my shadow, and then used a dark gray color to create the highlights since the light is coming from the right. This all helps it look more dimensional. Now Spider-Man's suit isn't just a red color fabric, it actually has this hexagon texture. So to add this, I use the select color range tool to remove the white color so it can leave the blue lines as a PNG. I then used color overlay to change the blue to a dark red and then scaled it down and warped it into place. This literally took me like 2 hours to place it all over his body. So I actually had to redraw Spidey's left arm because it looked like literal dog shit. So anyways, I redrew the arm, which looks so much better now, and did the usual by painting in the shadows with a darker red and the highlights with a light pink. At this point, I like the color tone of this red more, so I ended up changing it on the rest of the suit. I then added the webbing on the left arm the same way I did with the right. I also added the symbiote wrapping around his arm, and also the suit texture to finally complete Andrew's Spider-Man. Moving on to Venom's teeth, I used an image from one of the movies, warped it into place, and traced out the teeth. Once I traced them, I turned them white and started adding various shading and some texture to make them look more realistic. I then repeated that for every tooth, and then I started painting in the lips, the mouth, and this is how it turned out when I finished. Then to make the mouth look more menacing and scary, I painted in some saliva with a thin white brush, and to make it look reflected, I made some parts thick and white. Oh my god, that sounds terrible. But anyways, I did that a few times until I thought it looked good. Now for Venom's chest logo, I found this PNG for reference, and I started drawing it on his chest to the best of my ability. After drawing it, I colored it in with white. I then duplicated it, flipped it horizontally, and fixed the perspective. I erased the parts that I didn't need, and then used the body of the spider with the PNG image to finish the chest logo. Then I used Blend If to make it blend into his chest, and added some shadow and some bright parts back into the chest logo to make it look like it's actually a part of him. For the comic book assets, it was just a process of tracing them from the original cover, so I won't bore you guys with that. With that said, here's the final result.
Yeah, drinking dope turned me to a superhero, yeah.
I really love how this turned out. If you guys don't know, this is actually my first ever attempt at digital painting, and I think it turned out pretty good. There are a few things I can improve on, such as Venom's face, because it needs a little bit more detail. When we compare the two, I do like the original style because of its nostalgia for the style of old comic books. However, I really like the more realistic version. It conveys more emotion, fear, drama. But overall, I enjoy this new series. Let me know down in the comments which comic book you would like me to do next. With that said, I'll see you in my next video.